The goal has been achieved. Stephanie White, you really outdid yourself with this one. You've diminished, downplayed, made up myths in your own mind. Oh, she can't bring the ball up. Oh, it's too much pressure. Oh, we gotta change it up. You've convinced the rest of the world that Caitlin Clark is not one of the best to ever do it.
Just as the league was still adjusting to her long-range shooting and constant media attention, a new narrative began to emerge around Caitlin Clark. In one game, she was stretching defenses to their limits and dictating the flow of play. In the next, conversation started suggesting that her influence on the game had somehow diminished. Amid the growing debate, Stephanie White found herself at the center of the discussion. But how does a player capable of reshaping an opponent's entire strategy suddenly get portrayed as merely another player on the roster?
PR campaign. Evelyn DR sent this to me because the Indiana Fever is really trying to pump up Stephanie White these days. Let's see if we can get back in the good graces of the fandom. Stephanie White, off ball. Yeah, okay. So they put out this little marketing piece. Speaking of marketing pieces, we'll get to Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham trying to sell tickets.
If you're enjoying the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. It makes a bigger difference than you might realize. Beyond the highlight plays and impressive statistics, a subtle but noticeable shift has begun to emerge in the conversation surrounding Caitlin Clark. The tone of the discussion seems to have changed almost overnight, without any clear moment signaling the transition. What makes the situation particularly fascinating is that the change was not sparked by a dominant defensive performance from an opponent, or a significant decline in her production. Instead, it appears to be rooted in how she is being utilized, portrayed, and increasingly redefined within her own team environment. Few expected that a player who entered the league surrounded by generational expectations would so quickly become the subject of conversations centered on limitations rather than possibilities. Fans anticipated discussions about expanding her role, maximizing her strengths, and building around her unique skill set, not reducing her influence within the offense. Yet, that is increasingly the direction the narrative appears to be taking. What has made the situation even more divisive is the speed with which this perception has spread, shaping opinions across the league and influencing how both analysts and fans evaluate her impact.
Congratulations, you've diminished the Golden Goose. A feat I didn't think was possible. But Stephanie White, you've really outdone yourself. Stephanie White has diminished Caitlin Clark's play so much. She has shrunken her game to the point where GMs, instead of going 50-50, Caitlin Clark, Chelsea Gray last year, now Chelsea Gray has clearly surpassed and left Caitlin Clark in her rear view when it comes to top.
What makes the situation even more compelling is the way conversations about her role have evolved. Rather than focusing on how to maximize her strengths, the discussion increasingly centers on how to contain and reshape them. The emphasis seems to have shifted from unlocking her full potential to fitting her into a more structured and predictable frame. When that happens, perceptions naturally begin to change. The narrative no longer revolves around the unique advantages she brings to the court, but around how effectively she can adapt to a narrower role. And that shift can significantly influence how her overall impact is judged.
Like Holly Rowe of ESPN is opening up about Caitlin Clark in the 2026 season, which meaning that, it's a lot to be talked about. The Indiana Fever have one of the best orchestrated roster in the entire WNBA. A lot of people is 50-50 on them making it to the finals. My thing about them making it to the finals is Stephanie White, ultimately, to me, is the deciding factor, because we know that the pieces are there.
Instead of conversations about how much defensive attention she draws or how her passing vision bends coverages, there has been a growing emphasis on reducing predictability, moving her off the ball, and distributing responsibility in a way that subtly suggests her natural style requires correction rather than enhancement. That is where the debate begins to intensify, because once a player of her profile is discussed through the lens of restriction, the perception around her entire impact starts to shift, even if the box score still reflects productivity that most rookies in league history would struggle to match. The irony is that while these adjustments are being framed as strategic evolution, and even when the comparison is not entirely aligned in style or role, the mere fact that it is being made signals how quickly narratives can tighten around a young star when the discourse turns towards structure instead of freedom. What once felt like a straightforward discussion about a rising franchise centerpiece has started to drift into something more complicated, where perception is no longer just shaped by performance, but by how that performance is being interpreted through coaching decisions and team construction choices. Even more surprising is how quickly alternate young stars enter the same conversation space, with players like Paige Buchers being used as reference points in discussions about franchise direction, as if the league were already trying to redraw its future hierarchy before the current one has even stabilized. Comparison becomes even more layered when you consider that Caitlin Clark's rookie impact was historically loud, not just in scoring, but in playmaking gravity and audience engagement. Yet, the way current discussions are framed sometimes makes it sound as though that impact is being quietly reevaluated rather than celebrated.
Up here, mic'd up. Let's go.
Don't be trying to get athletic. just be bully. Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah, KK. Come on, Yellow. Yeah, tell him, Mike. Come on. Great cut. Great cut. Good. Mismatch. Yes. Good, Didi. Good, Tori. Good.
What fuels the debate further is how award conversations and GM-style evaluations begin to surface patterns that feel disconnected from recent on-court reality, especially when rankings or survey-style opinions start shifting toward players whose resumes are still developed. When franchise-building discussions lean toward selecting younger guards or different archetypes over proven production, it raises questions about whether the league is reacting to basketball fit, organizational preference, or simply narrative momentum that has drifted away from early season impressions. At the same time, established stars like Aya Wilson continue to anchor the league's hierarchy in a way that feels almost untouched by control, and system fit becomes the dominant talking point around a player who entered the league as a transformative offensive engine. The discussion naturally becomes more about containment than expansion, and that subtle shift changes everything about how fans interpret her trajectory. Even the idea of predictability, which is now frequently brought up in analysis, feels strange when applied to a player whose entire reputation was built on creativity, deep-range confidence, and the ability to manipulate defenses with vision and tempo rather than repetition.
She's not even better than Aja. There's another player, in college that's better than Caitlin Clark.
Who, Juju?
It's what?
Okay.
What?
Okay.
Both of them are better than Caitlin Clark.
Based off of what?
Caitlin Clark.
Based off of what?
Caitlin Clark is more entertaining to watch, and as a deep range can shoot from anywhere in the parking lot. But if we watch anything from her last year in college and her first year with the Fever, she struggles a little bit with ball control, especially when she drives to the paint, a little bit of limited move.
Great players across eras have often been labeled predictable at some point in their careers. Yet, that label rarely stuck because their dominance made predictability irrelevant, since the defense already knew what was coming, but still could not stop it. That is why historical comparisons matter in this conversation, because when names like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Shaquille O'Neal, or Dwayne Wade enter the discussion, the common thread is not unpredictability, but inevitability, where opponents were aware of tendencies, but powerless to neutralize them. This is where the current debate becomes emotionally charged, because it raises the question of whether today's critique is about actual limitations in what people see in those new roles rather than what the player demonstrated in her most dominant usage, which creates a gap between early reputation and evolving narrative. That gap is exactly where league-wide opinions start to form, especially in GM surveys or ranking discussions where perception often carries as much weight as performance trends. Once those perceptions shift, it becomes easier for alternative names to rise in comparison charts, even when the statistical or historical sample size does not fully support the leap in ranking, even when the context of experience, age, and professional sample size is still developed. It is also how veteran guards like Chelsea Gray get elevated in perception-based rankings of control and decision-making despite operating in a very different stage of career and system structure.
We got a lot of new players. Raven Johnson defense is off the Richter scale. I would have loved to see Lexi Hall play, but it is what it is. If she's dealing with an injury, so be it. Let her, fix herself up. But I want to see how everybody is going to look consistently. We need a consistent performance. These little preseason games, they was all right. I ain't gonna sit up here and downplay them like they was all bad. All of them wasn't bad. That Dallas ones was really, really entertaining.